Tonight, the future of the Catholic Church up for grabs, with a conclave now to choose the next pope getting into gear after the death of Pope Francis, of course, earlier on today. Who's on the short list for the top job as memorials for Francis pour in from around the world? Then stocks falling again today over concerns President Trump could fire the Fed chair. Why more investors seem to be selling America rather than buying it like the White House wants. And defense for the defense secretary, with his job maybe on the line. The fallout tonight for a defiant Pete Hegseth and, for now, his supportive boss after word the head of the Pentagon was in yet another controversial group chat on Signal. Plus, what's behind a gender gap in cancer deaths? The new numbers we're just getting in from a new report. Plus, why a deal with the director of this weekend's biggest box office hit could change how the movie business does business later in the show. Hey, I'm Hallie, and tonight we are learning Pope Francis died from a stroke and heart failure, according to the Vatican, as the world mourns the progressive leader of a faith followed by more than 1 billion people. Taking a live look now at Vatican City, where mourners have just trickled really out of St. Peter's Square, some 13 hours after his death was announced. You can actually see a couple of folks there in that live shot. He will be buried in about 2 miles away in a Roman church. His formal funeral rites already beginning. His body expected to be displayed in St. Peter's Basilica by Wednesday morning, with his funeral sometime in the next 4 to 6 days, so by the end of the weekend. After that, it's time for the conclave. You probably heard about it, right? After that big movie last year, you know, the secret election for picking a new pope. All the world's cardinals under the age of 80 are going to meet at the Sistine Chapel to vote. Many already on their way for the funeral, although the actual conclave isn't going to start for another couple of weeks. Once everybody's there, they'll cast secret ballots, and we will know if somebody has won by the color of the smoke. Black means they're still voting, but white means a new pope, like what we saw when Francis was elected back in 2013. So who's next? Well, 17 men are on the short list, set to have their resumes picked apart. And the big questions right now, will the next pope follow Francis's progressive reforms or revert to the more conservative approach of his predecessors? Can they address a Catholic Church that has seen a shift growing in Asia and Africa, slowing in Europe and the Americas, especially here in the U.S.? And who will show up to pay their respects to the Pope, to a man who touched so many lives with his dedication to helping those who are most vulnerable, who needed it? Hallie will get into the worldwide tributes in just a second, but I want to start live at the Vatican, and Molly Hunter is there. Molly, talk us through what is next here, some of the potential successors, because as we understand it, some of them have closer ties to Francis than others, right?
He transmitted that message.
Yeah, Hallie, that's exactly right. So as you said, basically the cardinals that are arriving, 135 under the age of 80, because you have to be under the age of 80 to be an eligible elector, have two choices. Essentially, choose someone who may continue Francis's legacy, or choose someone who may be a more conservative voice. And I'll walk you through just a couple. I know you mentioned 17, and we are watching closely, Hallie, and our NBC contributors are all over the resumes of all 17. But I'll walk you through 4 of the progressive ones. 2 of the leading ones, Cardinal Pietro Parolin. He's from Italy. He's one of the most experienced Vatican officials, and he's actually been the Secretary of State for Francis since 2013. Very involved in high-level diplomatic efforts and very close to Francis. And the other leading contender of those 4, Hallie, that people are talking a lot about, and would be another first, as you mentioned, the church is growing in Asia, is Cardinal Louis Tagle from the Philippines. He's considered a very strong candidate and has done a lot of things as far as his pastoral work, very in line with Francis. There are 2 conservative voices. I'll just put those names up on screen for you as well, including Cardinal Petro Erdo from Hungary, Hallie, and he's very close with Viktor Orban in Hungary. So a very, very different vision.
We've also talked about the challenge for the church as its demographic shift here. Like in the U.S., the number of Catholics who regularly attend Mass is dropping from like half around 2000 to closer than a third now. It is going to be, whoever the next pope will be, is going to be shaping the church, not just obviously in the U.S., but around the world as well.
One of the interesting things about the conclave, and we've been talking to people here, Hallie, about it, is that the conclave started long before Pope Francis even died in some ways, right? The conversations about where the church is right now, who would be the appropriate person to lead the church. And now in the next 15 to 20 days, during these general congregations, when cardinals descend on Vatican City and have these formal meetings, but also these kind of informal chats over pizza and wine, where apparently all the business actually does get done in Rome. Those conversations will then be about specific people and who actually is the most appropriate of these kind of names. How long, how short Hallie is will be a real indication of how divisive that decision, of course, is.
Before we get to the conclave, there's the funeral, of course. We said in the next 4 to 6 days, which, Molly, no matter how you count, it means it's going to happen at some time by the end of the weekend, right? And what's interesting here is that Francis, in many ways, laid out how he wanted to be remembered, how he wanted this funeral to look. And in death, it was a lot like his life. Simple, right? Substance over style. Pretty par for the course for him.
Yeah. Completely, Hallie. This is a man of the people, the Pope of the people. He wanted to be out in the crowds, even as we saw yesterday in his Popemobile. He was incredibly close to the crowds, even until his very last moments. And that is exactly the way his funeral is going to be. It's not going to be some big state flashy funeral. Even as heads of state, we know that President Trump and Melania, First Lady Melania Trump, will be here. Even as heads of state and tens of thousands of people come, it is not going to be the same as his predecessors. And one example, Hallie, we've learned one small detail of things that he changed is that he's not going to even be buried in the 3 traditional coffins. He will be placed in one simple wood and zinc coffin. He will also not be buried in the Vatican grottos. He will be buried, as you mentioned, in a Basilica Santa Maria Maggiore in central Rome.
Molly, real quick before we let you go, we're seeing all these people behind you as you've been there. And I know you obviously, so many did scramble to get to the Vatican here when this happened. What has it been like there? We've seen crowds of people. I assume that's only going to grow. What's it been like as you've been there?
Yeah, we got here this afternoon, Hallie, and we've been talking to as many people as we possibly can here. Lots of people who were on vacation, lots of people who came with hopes of seeing the Pope during the Holy Year celebrations of the last week, during Easter. But you can see it's 11 at night, Hallie, and there's still a lot of people out here who just want to be together at this moment.
Molly, thank you very much for being with us there live at the Vatican. Appreciate that. I want to go to Hallie now, who's covering more from London. And Hallie, President Trump says he is going to be going to the Pope's funeral. That's coming into us in just the last 90 minutes or so. With a message to American Catholics, he says, we love you all. We're all with you. It's an honor to have the support of the Catholics. The Pope has not shied away from confronting some of the more divisive political issues that are reverberating not just in the U.S., but around the country. And he did so in his final Easter message less than 24 hours ago, too, calling on, condemning essentially what he called contempt for migrants and the most vulnerable.
Yeah. Well, the Pope's message of tolerance, of empathy for migrants, of respect for the environment, Hallie, they really stand in sharp contrast to what we've heard from some world leaders, including President Trump. You'll remember when Pope Francis in 2016 condemned Donald Trump's stance on immigration, he said something quite remarkable at the time. A person who thinks only about walls and of not building bridges is not a Christian. And that prompted an angry response from Donald Trump. At the time, he said that he believed the Pope should resign. And on Gaza and on many other conflicts, the Pope has always landed on the side of advocating for peace. He would call representatives of Gaza's small Christian community every night if he could. So this is really a Pope whose embrace of social justice issues, of human rights, of respect for the environment and against climate change, among other things, was really, I think, is going to be his legacy, his progressive legacy, as you've been discussing there with Molly.
Hallie live for us in London. Hallie, thank you very much. We'll have more, of course, continuing coverage of what is next for the Catholic Church coming up later in the show. But now to the economy and your money and your savings, maybe with some big headlines on that front. And President Trump turning up the heat on the Fed chair. The markets are not loving it. See, down, Dow, NASDAQ, S&P 500, down overall 9% since the beginning of this month when the president rolled out his big tariff plan. But today's slide may have more to do with comments like these. The president on Truth Social slamming his own Fed chair, calling him Mr. Too Late, a major loser. He's frustrated that Jay Powell hasn't lowered interest rates or indicated that he will anytime soon. Here's the thing. It's not just stocks that are down. Look, bond prices are down. The U.S. dollar index is down, seeming like the world is not quite doing what the president wants, which is buy America. Instead, they're selling America instead. I want to bring in NBC's Brian Chung with more on this. The markets really are concerned about this talk about the potential firing of Jay Powell. It's interesting because this is, a leader speaks and the markets respond. And we've seen that today.
Yeah, well, I mean, look, we already had volatility in these markets because of all of the tariff talk, right? We have no certainty now than we did 3 weeks ago over what's going to happen tomorrow. If you're a business, owner, or if you're an investor, you just don't want to make decisions because you don't know what the tariff policy is going to look like. Now, compound on top of that, we don't know if the economic steward of the U.S., which is the head of the Federal Reserve, who is currently Fed Chair Jay Powell, who, by the way, Trump appointed during his first term, you don't know if he's going to have his job through the end of his term in May of 2026. So you have the president that's threatening to perhaps want to even pull him from that position. There are legal questions over whether or not he can do so, but that's just introducing another layer of uncertainty to the markets, and that's a big reason why we've seen selling in the Monday trading, which, by the way, is probably an extension of the fact that markets were also closed on Friday, so they didn't have the chance to react to even some of the commentary at the end of last week from the president over being interested in perhaps firing his own Fed chair at the central bank. But again, all this uncertainty compounding on top of one another.
You've also got the president late this afternoon meeting with major retailers, the heads of Target, I think Lowe's, Home Depot, I think, as well, maybe Walmart as well, maybe not Lowe's. But all of this has to do with tariffs, right, Brian? I mean, I have to think he's getting an earful from some of these companies in a respectful way because of what this means for consumer prices. Yeah, and look, when it comes to how the markets are responding here, we have to remember that the president did ratchet back the tariffs, at least on those quote-unquote reciprocal tariffs on other countries around the world after seeing what was going on in the bond market. So clearly, he is listening to investors, and by extension, he's probably listening to these big business leaders at the likes of these retail companies like Target and Walmart, which have reportedly had meetings at the White House today. So, yes, whether or not those conversations, though, are going to translate into actual action, we'll have to see. But you could imagine a lot of these financial types are probably also telling the president, hey, let's chill out on the rhetoric with the Federal Reserve, which I want to point out is not new. The president was doing the same thing in 2018, 2019 to also then Fed Chair Jay Powell when he described him as a golfer who can't putt. So, again, the Powell is used to this. Brian Chung, thank you very much. More to watch on that front. Appreciate it. Tonight, you've also got President Trump defending his defense secretary with questions over whether Pete Hegseth can hang on to his job. You've got the White House press secretary pushing back on a report that the White House is considering replacements for Hegseth. She calls that fake news, saying the president stands strongly behind the defense secretary. And sure enough, President Trump was out with praise for him just today. Watch.
He is doing a great job.
Why do you still have confidence?
Because he's doing a great job. Ask the Houthis how he's doing. Ask the Houthis how much this function has. His son, Pete's doing a great job. Everybody's happy with him.
So why is it news that the president is backing his cabinet secretary? Well, it's because that cabinet secretary is finding himself in the middle of yet another sensitive group chat on Signal. NBC News learning Secretary Hegseth used his personal phone to share information about U.S. military operations in Yemen to a Signal group that included his wife, his brother. This was first reported by the New York Times. Remember, this is not the first Signal chat we've talked about. If you're having deja vu, it's because the first one, remember last month, saw the editor-in-chief of The Atlantic mistakenly added to a group chat in Signal a different one about strikes in Yemen. That created real consternation from both sides of the aisle. I want to bring in Kelly O'Donnell, who is live for us at the White House tonight. What's interesting, Kelly, you have seen at least one Republican member of Congress walk up to the line of saying, hey, if I were President Trump, I'd get rid of Pete Hegseth, not calling on his firing. And as we heard, the president has made clear he is standing behind his man for now. How long can that last, do we think, based on the conversations you're having with sources?
Well, there'll be political pressure that will build, and part of that will be how do they actually address the underlying issue. Thus far, they have not done so. Where there is one Signal chat, there might be another, and that's what we've learned with this particular episode. The Signal chat that involved senior members of the administration, cabinet level, that got a lot of attention in discussing some of the times and critical pieces of information related to the Yemen strike prior to it happening. This is a separate Signal chat that includes the secretary's wife, his brother, who has a role as a liaison to the Department of Homeland Security from the Pentagon, his personal lawyer who has his own military background. But one of the big questions is why would these individuals have a need to know any of this information prior to a military strike? different, perhaps you could argue, than talking to Secretary Rubio or the CIA director in the other Signal chat. So one of the questions that lawmakers are now asking, certainly Democrats, there are those saying he should resign, he should be pulled from this job and replaced. This particular episode needs to be a part of an investigation that's already ongoing on Signal Chat 1. Hallie?
Kelly, we have also heard from the defense secretary himself. He is, and we saw this in his confirmation hearing, too, defiant. We know that President Trump likes to see somebody fighting for him, fighting for his agenda, fighting for their job. Clearly, that is what Pete Hegseth is doing here.
Yes, and the setting was perhaps a little dissonant to the subject matter, attending the Easter egg roll with his family. But the secretary did engage with the pool reporters who were there. But notably, he did not address the substance of this new allegation that he disclosed this information, military-sensitive information, prior to the operation commencing. And he used this as an occasion to bash the media, to say that there were anonymous sources involved. At the same time, there are some sources in the Pentagon, meaning former officials who have been critical publicly of the secretary under their own names on just his broad leadership. So Secretary Hegseth pushed back hard today. Here's part of that.
They take anonymous sources from disgruntled former employees, and then they try to slash and burn people and ruin their reputations. Not going to work with me. I have spoken to the president, and we are going to continue fighting on the same page all the way.
So the top officials, the president himself, the press secretary, and the secretary saying that President Trump is behind Hegseth and effectively saying nothing to see here. We'll see how much there is additional inquiry or calls and questions, especially from Republicans going forward. Hallie?
Kelly O'Donnell live for us there on the North Lawn of the White House tonight. Kel, good to see you. Thank you very much. Also tonight, some new developments into us after we're learning somebody stole the purse of the Homeland Security Secretary at a restaurant last night in D.C. Let me bring in NBC's Ryan Riley, who is covering this one for us because thousands of dollars were apparently in that purse that was snatched. Ryan, typically, stolen purse doesn't meet the level of anything other than maybe a local crime news blotter, right? But when it is a cabinet secretary, when it is somebody who has Secret Service protection, it starts to raise some questions. How did this happen? Was there some kind of a security failure here? What do we know, and where does this go?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And, our colleague Yamiche Alcindor actually asked the secretary about sort of what happened at the Easter egg hunt, where we've been seeing some clips of today. Here's what she had to say.
Sorry that happened, first of all. Yamiche with the NBC News. We're just concerned that you're worried about that.
Yeah, no. Yeah, it's not resolved yet, but thank you.
Okay. Do you know if the Secret Service has any leads on it or anything?
So obviously, when you're at a restaurant with your family, it's something, I don't know if you've had anyone have that experience before, but, you're very distracted, right? It kind of makes you a little bit of an easy target. That's something that occasionally happens in D.C., people having their bags snatched away from them, stolen when they aren't looking. But of course, with that security detail, that's what sort of raises all of these questions, how someone was able to get so close. Apparently what happened, this individual who was wearing a mask was able to sort of push the bag over with his leg, and they're looking at some of that security footage. But, there's still sort of a lot of questions about how the security detail let someone, get that close, and if they had eyes on the secretary the whole time.
Ryan Riley, thank you very much. Appreciate it. Let's take you to New York now, where we have some developing news. A Manhattan jury in just the last hour finding the wife of former Senator Bob Menendez guilty on 15 counts, including on her corruption trial. Federal prosecutors say she and her husband were partners in crime on this. They were convicted on a lot of the same charges about a year apart in the same Manhattan courthouse, accepting bribes of cash, gold bars, and Mercedes-Benz for political favors. Remember, Menendez, Nadine Menendez, was indicted back in September of 2023 with her husband, but her trial was delayed so she could be treated for breast cancer. Melanie Zanona is joining us now. Melanie, talk us through the verdict here and how this may not mark the end of the Menendez saga, if you will.
Yeah, not quite yet. We do know that former Senator Bob Menendez will begin an 11-year prison sentence beginning in June, and then Nadine Menendez will report for her sentencing just 6 days later. So just a really stunning fall from grace for the former senator who was once the chairman of the powerful Senate Foreign Relations Committee. And this whole scandal also ensnared his wife in the process as well. During this trial, which lasted over the course of 3 weeks, she was accused of essentially being her husband's partner in crime, acting as the sort of go-between as she sought to help sell her husband's power and access in exchange for bribes. During an FBI raid on the couple's home in 2022, agents found nearly $500,000 worth of cash, $150,000 worth of gold bars, all stuffed into jackets and boots, all scattered throughout the house, as well as a luxury Mercedes-Benz in the driveway as well, all of which prosecutors said was part of this bribery scheme that the couple had been engaged in. Now, Bob Menendez and Nadine Menendez both said they are not guilty, that they never took any bribes, that everything that Bob Menendez did was in the course of his normal actions in helping constituents. But jurors did not agree with that. They found the couple guilty on all counts in separate trials. Initially, the couple was supposed to be tried together, but Nadine Menendez, after she was diagnosed with breast cancer, her trial was postponed. Now she will also be reporting for a prison sentence in June as well.
Melanie Zanona, thank you very much. Down in El Salvador, a group of Democratic lawmakers are right now pushing for the release of the man the Trump administration mistakenly deported to a prison there, Kilmar Abrego Garcia. Of course, the man from Maryland with legal status and a migrant from El Salvador was never charged or convicted of any crime. The government alleges he is a member of the MS-13 gang. His family and attorneys deny that. His wife, in a statement today, says this trip from lawmakers sends a powerful message that he should be freed now. But the Speaker of the House views it differently. Speaker Mike Johnson on X late today saying House Democrats traveled to El Salvador as part of their obsession to bring a violent, illegal alien and member of MS-13 back into the U.S. This kind of rhetoric, this kind of language we have heard from conservatives and from the White House. David Noriega has made his way to El Salvador and is joining us now. Bring us up to speed on these developments, David, because this growing controversy over the president's deportation plans has escalated on a couple of fronts.
Yeah, Hallie, so the group of Democratic lawmakers that visited El Salvador, they arrived last night, they've been here all day. They had a couple of goals, some of which were very concrete, others of which were more abstract. The concrete goals were to put pressure on both the Bukele and the Trump administrations to materially change the situation of Kilmar Abrego Garcia by either releasing him, which is their ultimate goal, and returning him to the United States, or at least allowing him access to counsel, or, for example, they sent a letter to Secretary of State Marco Rubio today requesting daily proof of life from the penitentiary system here in El Salvador on Kilmar Abrego Garcia. They did not achieve any of those goals. They met with embassy officials here in San Salvador today. Those embassy officials indicated that there was not going to be any meaningful change in the Trump administration's posture to the Abrego Garcia case. The more abstract goal is to keep public pressure, keep public attention on this case. On that, the lawmakers say that they have been successful. I spoke to a couple of them this morning. I want to play you a little bit of what they had to say. Take a listen.
What's really important is that Donald Trump is defying a 9-0 decision of the Supreme Court to bring Kilmar Abrego Garcia back home to the United States. Lower courts have affirmed that. The administration has said they sent him here by accident. And this is a massive due process crisis in our country.
We all should be terrified by the idea that anyone could be taken and put away in another country.
Hallie, Trump and the Republicans are responding to these trips to El Salvador with everything from harsh criticism to mockery. The congressional Republicans, for example, have offered to pay for future Democrats' visits to El Salvador because they believe it damages their image to be, in their view, advocating for people they describe as violent criminals and gang members. Hallie?
David Noriega live for us there in El Salvador. David, thank you for being there. Back here at home tonight, the FAA is looking into why a Delta engine caught fire just seconds after the plane left the gate down in Orlando. I want to show you this. Look at that. That's scary. You don't want to be on a plane and see that, right? Flames, a lot of smoke on the right side engine. You can see the wing was kind of charred. Some of the nearly 300 passengers and crew on board evacuating. There they are, walking across the tarmac there. They came down on those slides, on those chutes. Everybody had to get out. This is some video now from inside the plane. Some passengers still on board. They're trying to make their way to the front as they're looking at fire crews, emergency responders trying to put that fire in the engine out. Now, here's the good news on all this. No reports of anybody getting hurt. I want to bring in Tom Costello now with more on this. Still scary and still rare, Tom, to see something like that.
Very scary and, yes, thankfully very rare. This was an Airbus A330, fully loaded, as you mentioned, 300 passengers and crew members. This was the #2 engine. In other words, if you're sitting on the plane, it's the engine on the right-hand side. And what Delta says is this was a fire in the tailpipe. That is very rare indeed. It quickly was shooting flames out the back of that engine. What happened? Well, the pilots immediately shut fuel down so it was no longer feeding fuel into the fire. That helped immediately shut down the fire, and firefighters then hit it with a water cannon. Very fast response by firefighters. Meanwhile, as you saw, passengers were sliding down the evacuation slides, but they could only slide down the left-hand side of the plane because the right side had the fire, right? You don't want people sliding down onto that side of the plane. But because of that, that slowed everything down a little bit. Thankfully, nobody injured, and Delta says everybody has been reaccommodated or will be reaccommodated as well.
One thing, too, good reminder, don't get your luggage. Don't be trying to grab stuff on your way out, right? I mean, that's
Can I underscore this 100 times? The flight attendants were yelling to passengers, leave everything behind, get out, there's a fire. People were still grabbing their carry-ons, still grabbing their backpacks.
Leave it.
I'm sorry.
Leave it, man.
That is the dumbest damn thing you can do. I'm going to be emphatic about this. Please listen to me. This is life or death. If you delay people behind you because you're grabbing your carry-on and somebody dies, that's on you. The stakes are life and death. And it doesn't matter how many times we report this over the years. Leave your carry-ons behind every time people want to grab the carry-on. So that is such an important message, and I'm emphatic about it, but I think that we really got to listen.
You got to be, Tom.
Lastly, guess what? There was another emergency landing after this one back in Orlando. Another flight, headed also to Atlanta, had to turn around because of a cabin pressurization issue with Delta. They came back, landed safely, and Delta says they apologized to the passengers on both flights.
Is this something where we're hearing, it feels like we're hearing more about incidents on planes because we're more attuned to it because of things that have happened over the course of the last few months, these high-profile incidents? Or are some of these things happening more often? Do we know yet? Can we quantify that yet?
I think yes and yes. Okay. In other words, yes, we're paying a lot more attention. Yeah. Second of all, under any circumstance, this kind of a situation we saw today in Orlando would get our attention. Yeah. Absolutely, right? The emergency landing we had in Denver, the emergency landing in Houston, the plane crashes in Toronto and Reagan National, the close call at Midway. This has been a year of close calls, and that's why a lot of people are on edge.
That's right. Tom Costello, we're so glad to have you with us. Thank you for the reality check on all of it. I appreciate it. We've got to get to some breaking news just into us. We have just learned in the last maybe 90 seconds, Harvard University is now suing the Trump administration over those multi-billion-dollar cuts to research funding for the school. Harvard is calling it in this suit unconstitutional and illegal. Now, this is the latest development in an escalating showdown that you probably already know about. We've been talking about it for days now. The university, Harvard, resisted a list of demands from the Trump administration on things like eliminating its DEI program altogether and mandatory sharing of some admissions and hiring data. Let me bring in Antonia Hilton, who's joining us now. I believe, Antonia, this lawsuit has been officially fired. I don't believe we have a response from the Trump administration yet, but bring us up to speed.
We do not have that response yet. But, Hallie, what I can tell you is that this is the most aggressive and sort of comprehensive pushback that we have seen from one of these universities. So many of them have come under fire from the Trump administration. And their sort of stated aims here have been to root out, to combat anti-Semitism and violence on college campuses like Harvard's. But Harvard's lawsuit now is arguing that this has, and their demands have, been a violation of the school's First Amendment rights and is outright unconstitutional. They They describe the administration threatening them with unprecedented interference in their operations. As you mentioned, the desire to audit the beliefs of students and faculty and change much of the way the school operates, and then also with the loss of billions of dollars. And there's a lot of attention in this lawsuit on what that would really mean here. Harvard is the oldest institution of learning in the U.S. It leads to millions, billions of dollars of value in terms of economic value, biotechnological value, the life-saving cancer research alone. A lot of attention is paid to that here. And the other thing is that much of this is actually happening at hospitals and sort of ancillary parts of the Harvard community and campus that have nothing to do with what's been going on with protests on the undergraduate campus that all of us would be visually familiar with itself. And so Alan Garber, who, by the way, is Jewish and has himself fought anti-Semitism on Harvard's campus and spoken out against it, he's really advancing the argument here that what the Trump administration is doing, he says, is using this as sort of a cover to take control of the university. And now Harvard and presumably maybe other universities are trying to push back in this much more aggressive manner. Hallie.
Antonia Hilton, plenty to watch on that front. Thank you for bringing us that developing news tonight, Antonia. Appreciate it. We got a lot more to get to coming up here on the show, including the so-called doomsday mom defending herself in the trial over the murder of her fourth husband. Why nobody is taking the stand for the defense. Plus, what's up with the big shrooms surge? The brand new numbers just into us showing us which generation is using them most. And it may surprise you. A new report on cancer shows a decline in the number of people dying across the country, but there is a catch. It's showing more women being diagnosed with cancer overall. It looked at data from the last couple of decades, right, since 2001 up to 2022, and says things like screening, better treatment, and fewer people using tobacco helped lower the death rates for lung cancer and other smoking-related cancers. But researchers say there's more people being diagnosed with other kinds of cancer, particularly more women, more young adults. Dr. Kavita Patel is joining us now. What does this study show us, and why is it such a big deal?
Yeah, Hallie, so what's interesting is that, as you said, that we've seen significant declines, even through COVID. Honestly, a lot of us were wondering if these declines would be persistent through COVID. And yes, there were some problems with access to health care and to screenings, but overall, a significant decline. Not surprised about the smoking, but then unfortunately, just as surprised about the incidence of cancer. I want to highlight something that you just touched on. If you're a woman ages 50 to 64, you are now more likely to have an incidence that surpasses men for incidence of cancer. And if you're under the age of 50, it's pretty young, that you are also more significantly likely to actually be diagnosed with cancer. That means that women are not getting detected and they're getting cancers earlier.
So for people to decrease the risk of any cancer, but specifically the cancers mentioned in the study, it's all about screening. It's all about sort of proactive awareness, right?
Yeah. So the 5 things, I think, Hallie, it's a perfect time to just remind people of like 5 things we can do, like reducing alcohol intake, reducing tobacco intake, thinking about a healthy weight, nutrition overall, and then talking about the screenings. Just a reminder that we actually have now a robust kind of set of screenings that you can do, everything from lung, breast, cervical cancer, and I want to put a plug-in for a vaccine that can prevent cervical cancer as well. So all of this should be in your kind of armament, man or woman. Talk to your doctor about it, because depending on your genetic risk factors, we might screen you earlier. Just bring the conversation up. It's never too young to have that conversation.
That's for sure. Dr. Kavita Patel, good to see you as always. Thank you. Let's get you over to the 5 things our team thinks you should know about tonight. Closing arguments are happening right now with the so-called doomsday mom resting her case without calling a signal witness or presenting any evidence. Lori Vallow Daybill, remember, is charged with conspiring to murder her estranged husband. She has pleaded not guilty. She's telling the jury the shooting was in self-defense. Prosecutors say that's not the case. They say she conspired to murder her husband so she could collect life insurance money. Vallow is already serving a life sentence in Idaho for killing her 2 children. Number 2, a woman now suing former football player and TV commentator Shannon Sharpe for sex assault and battery. The anonymous plaintiff claims they had a, quote, rocky consensual relationship lasting 2 years before he started relentlessly pursuing her. He allegedly forcibly had sex without her consent, even recorded some of their sexual activities. The complaint seeks a minimum of $50 million. Sharp's attorney is pushing back strongly, saying the suit is filled with lies and will not succeed. Number 3, we're now seeing measles cases in more than half of the United States officially, with 85 new cases reported since last week. Remember, that's after 2 unvaccinated children died in Texas and 1 person died in New Mexico. This surge in cases is nearly triple the total number of measles we saw back in 2024. Number 4, use of the drug in magic mushrooms, known as psilocybin, is on the rise. It's spiked nearly 200% in people over the age of 30 since 2019. So that's like your millennial population. Shrooms in some places have become the first hallucinogenic substance legal in some states, with hopes they could treat mental health and substance use disorders. Number 5, if you're a Duke basketball fan, the NBA draft just got a little more exciting, maybe. Cooper Flagg is throwing his name in there. Just 18 years old, he put it out on Instagram. He's only played 1 college basketball season and was named National Player of the Year 5 times this year. He's expected to be one of the top picks in the draft. Also tonight, new into us, we are learning that the White House says it is considering ways to reverse the declining birth rate in the United States and is encouraging Americans to have more babies, according to what an administration official is telling NBC News. The New York Times is reporting that the Trump administration, getting into specifics, is considering giving out $5,000 baby bonuses, as they're called, to every U.S. mother after delivery, paying for programs to educate women about their menstrual cycles, and reserving 30% of Fulbright scholarships for people who are married or have kids. The U.S. birth rate hit a record low in 2023. And as we've talked about here on the show, there could be economic consequences to that, like an aging population, a shrinking labor force. NBC's Yamiche Alcindor is joining us now. And what's interesting, Yamiche, we just told folks last week about the so-called pronatalist movement, as it is called, and it clearly has some close allies in the White House here.
That's right. They definitely have close allies in the White House, including the president himself, who has encouraged Americans to have more children. Now, we just got a statement in from the White House press secretary, Caroline Leavitt. I want to read part of it to you. She said, President Trump is proudly implementing policies to uplift American families, from securing order at the border to keeping violent criminals out of our communities to lowering taxes and the cost of living. The president wants America to be a country where all children can safely grow up and achieve the American dream. Now, we've also been hearing from close allies of the president, including Vice President J.D. Vance and, of course, Elon Musk, the world's richest man and a top Trump aide. Elon Musk has at least 14 children. J.D. Vance, the vice president, has about 3. Take a listen to what they've said.
Most countries, they should view the birth rate as the single biggest problem they need to solve.
I want more babies in the United States of America.
And as you noted, in 2023, we had one of the record low birth rates here, about 3.6 million births. That was the lowest since 1979. And since about 2015, the birth rate has declined in the U.S. by about 2%, except for in 2019, 2020, when maybe people had a little bit more time on their hands. That being said, the president has also been pushing for IVF. At one point during the campaign, he told NBC News that he was going to make IVF, in vitro fertilization, a fertility treatment, free for all Americans. He now has a number of his aides studying that issue. So the president has been very vocal and supportive of having more children, and we'll have to see sort of what this administration actually does to facilitate that. Hallie.
Yamiche Alcindor live for us there outside the West Wing. Yamiche, thank you very much. Good to see you. Coming up, why some new arguments in court could totally change how we all use Google. Plus, take a look. This semi-truck essentially exploding on a highway in Indiana. Oof, why a huge stretch of the highway is still shut down. Why California crooks are chopping down a ton of trees in L.A. But first, Google today in court fighting to keep a judge from breaking up the company. Lawyers for Google argue that that would be, in their words, extreme, and it would hurt people by breaking Google products that millions use. The Department of Justice, on the other hand, said that if the court doesn't do something now, Google could use its big investments into AI to become even more dominant in the world of searching for stuff online. It's all part of this massive antitrust case where a judge has already ruled last summer that Google, yes, basically has a monopoly on web search. Question is now what to do about it. If the DOJ has its way, Google could be forced to sell off Chrome. You know Chrome, it's that web browser that like 2/3 of the planet uses. Google obviously hopes to avoid that. I want to bring in NBC News legal analyst Danny Savalos, who's been following this one for us. Google is fighting this battle on two fronts. It just lost another monopoly case about its ad service. We could be looking at a very different company if and when this all gets settled in court, right?
Yes. In fact, they even lost another case about its app store. I think that was 2023. So Google's been hit quite a bit by the courts in the last few years. But let's first take a look at what the DOJ wants the court to do to Google. We have that here on a full screen. And the DOJ wants Google to have its Chrome browser sold off to another company, end those payments to tech companies to make Google the default search engine, and, of course, license search results to competitors. Now, when it comes to antitrust, Hallie, there are usually two categories of remedies. Some are basically conduct-based. In other words, the court says, thou shalt do a bunch of things. Google would prefer that outcome to the other option, which is a structural remedy. In other words, breaking up the company, like we talked about, breaking off these pieces, whether it be the phone part of the company, the search engine part of the company, whatever the case may be. That's something Google would really not like to see happen.
So what is the best case for Google? If that's the worst case scenario, what's the best case for Google?
Yeah, Google's going to want conduct-based remedies. In other words, the best they can hope for, because think about it. We're really, if this were a criminal case, we're at the sentencing phase. The guilt has already been found by the judge. This trial now is really about what is the court going to do to remedy the situation. And antitrust is so unique because no two antitrust cases are alike. And it's also a bit of a paradox because, as we've talked about on the show, and this is one of Google's arguments, that the government says we have a monopoly. We say we're just really successful. We're really good at this. We beat Microsoft on the merits, not because of anything wrong that we did. So, I mean, they both might be a little right. Google may have a monopoly, may have too much power in the industry. And on the other end, Google got there by good old-fashioned hard work, maybe.
Danny Savalos, one to watch. What's the timeline on that, by the way? When do we expect a resolution? Days, weeks, months, years?
No, I mean, the resolution, I think, probably months. I would say months in this case.
Danny, thanks. NBC News covers hundreds of other stories every day. And because it can be tough to read or watch or listen to them all, our bureau teams have done it for you. This is what they tell us is going down in their regions in a segment we call The Local. Out of our Midwestern Bureau, look at this. This tractor trailer in flames after it exploded, essentially, on an Indiana highway. Some lanes reopened, but even now, part of the road is still shut down. The fire was put out, and fortunately, there aren't any reports of anybody hurt. Out of our Western Bureau, police are looking into why multiple trees have been mysteriously chopped down in downtown LA. You see it there? At first, people were like, oh, maybe that's just the city doing some work. The trees were just left there, though, on streets, blocking sidewalks. No suspects have been identified, and nobody really knows why it's happening. Out of our Northeast Bureau today, tens of thousands of people running the Boston Marathon, some of them breaking records and making history. A runner from Kenya winning the women's division and smashing the record for fastest time there. On the men's side, another Kenyan taking home first place. And listen to this, that runner's brother also won the marathon back in 2012. So that makes him the first brothers in marathon history in Boston to hold that championship title. You could say it runs in the family. Coming up, why some of the neediest teams in the NFL may not get the young star quarterbacks they're looking for. NFL teams hoping for a quick and cheap fix to their football frustrations, maybe out of luck Thursday night. Why? Because the most important and most expensive position is in short supply this year. We're talking quarterbacks. Take a look at these big three mock drafts. All of them have Cam Ward from Miami going #1 overall to the Titans in Tennessee. But after that, ESPN's got a couple quarterbacks. The Athletics got one. Our partners over at NBC Sports don't have any other QB in the first round. And that is a big deal because as quarterback salaries are soaring to become bigger chunks of the salary cap, one of the most effective ways for teams to get back into the playoffs is to take a young QB who's still only on a rookie deal, a la the Washington Commanders. They built up a good team, drafted Jaden Daniels on his cheap contract, right to the playoffs. Obviously, ultimately defeated by the Philadelphia Eagles on their march to winning the Super Bowl.
on,
Sam
man.
Brock is joining us now. What? It's just a fact.
It's gratuitous. It's gratuitous. It's unnecessary.
Here's what's interesting about this whole thing is that quarterbacks in so many ways deliver, and there's other positions too, but especially quarterbacks, the razzle-dazzle in the league, right? They're in so many ways the faces of these franchises. They're critical for viewers as the NFL is looking to reach out to, for example, more women. You know, younger folks are already a big part of the NFL demo, but there's a big demo that the NFL wants to reach. Quarterbacks are a part of that for each of these teams. You don't have to find a QB in the first round, but sometimes it helps, right?
Absolutely. Your synopsis was spot on. This is the foundation, not just for an NFL team, but it's also a really important position. Yes.
Was that your polite way of saying you took everything I was going to say? I'm sorry. I like to talk about
No,
this.
that's not what I was saying. That's not what I was saying. I will, however, answer your question, which is that you have this wild pendulum swing where last year, Hallie, 6 of the top 12 picks in the draft were all quarterbacks. And it's not like this year there's not a lot of need. There are 5 or 6 teams that desperately need quarterbacks in the NFL. But these particular prospects, their traits are not strong enough. And by traits, I mean, how big are they? What's their arm talent like? What kind of mobility do they possess? This is where the top 5 or 6 prospects in this year's draft stack up as overall prospects, according to The Athletic. This is a very viable source. Cam Ward is the only one that's considered to be likely a starting quarterback in the NFL. He's rated, as you can see on that graphic there, as the number 13 overall prospect, but he's going to be the number 1 pick. Shedeur Sanders, who was the most intriguing and polarizing prospect in the entire draft. Where is he going to go? 3 to the Giants, 21 to the Pittsburgh Steelers, or not even in the first round? He's ranked as the 34th overall talent. Then you get Jackson Dart and Tyler Shuck, Jalen Milroe. Let's fast forward now, or I should say, rewind to last year and look at the top quarterback prospects in that draft, and you'll see something very different. Caleb Williams was ranked as the number 1 player in the draft. Drake May, top 5. Jaden Daniels, the aforementioned, who ended up being so far the best quarterback in this draft, was the number 8 overall prospect. J.J. McCarthy, Bo Nix, the same deal. So what you're seeing is a massive swing in the valuation of these players and their ceilings. And we mentioned the quarterbacks, Hallie, that the teams that need quarterbacks. That includes the New York Giants. It includes, the Pittsburgh Steelers. It includes the Raiders.
Yeah.
You have, obviously, the Saints. They pick at 9. And then the Tennessee Titans, they're the first pick in the draft. They're going to take a quarterback. But then it's like, who's after Cam Ward?
Sam, I feel like I don't need to watch SportsCenter now that I've watched you because I'm so well informed about this. Pull up out of the sports weeds for a second, though. Explain why this matters to the casual NFL watcher, maybe somebody who only dips in for the playoffs. Because I keep coming back to this idea that this stuff matters. The QB is not just the linchpin of the team for its gameplay. It's like the linchpin of the brand for the team too.
It matters for a couple of reasons. One, because a quarterback can swing the entire franchise's prospects. You can have basically a mediocre team, but if you get an Andrew Luck, to go make a Colts reference to a few years ago, he can carry an entire franchise on his own, and you can build pieces around him. But you need that one guy, and it's really hard to find. And then also just the idea that these guys are coming in and they have varied stories where they've gone to different schools and had backgrounds where they've had to hone their craft over the course of years. The time, the effort, the sacrifice. I know Jalen Hurts for you was not considered for the Eagles to be a high-end prospect, and he worked his way to the top of the NFL pyramid. That's what we all want to see, right? That's exciting stuff.
It sure is. Anything's exciting when you're talking about the Super Bowl champion Philadelphia Eagles.
No doubt about it.
Thank you so much for being with us. I appreciate you. Thanks for that breakdown.
Thanks,
We'll be looking
Hallie.
for more, of course, when the draft starts later this week.
You got it.
Coming up here on the show, the new horror movie hit that may actually be spooking some Hollywood executives. Next. All right, so have you seen Sinners? It's that big new horror movie that raked in $63 million over this past weekend. But more importantly, it has a lot of people in Hollywood and beyond wondering whether the ownership deal that the studio reportedly struck with its director, Black Panther director Ryan Coogler, is going to have a big impact on future deals. This is the 4th collaboration between Coogler and star Michael B. Jordan. This time they're fighting vampires. But even more frightening, perhaps, to studios, the unusually generous deal that Coogler apparently cut with Warner Brothers. I want to bring in NBC's Dana Griffin, who's been following all of this for us. And this is part of what is elevating this to this interesting sort of news story, Dana, is that this particular deal that Ryan Coogler got could change the business of the movie business in some ways. Explain that.
Yeah, I think that's what some people are fearful of, but this was a very rare, unique deal, especially because, think about it, Ryan Coogler is a very rare talent. So according to Puck News and the New York Times, they say that Ryan Coogler not only got the first first dollar gross, which essentially means Warner Brothers agreed to give him a cut of the gross ticket sales rather than waiting for the film to become profitable, which is more common. Coogler will also own the rights to Sinners in 2050. That's a rare concession for studios to make. You have some rival film execs saying that they were horrified that Warner Brothers would give a film away even after 25 years. And you had one anonymous studio exec say that the Sinners deal sets a very dangerous precedent, another calling this an extinction level threat. Now, you have other experts who say, it's not that serious. This was a one-time deal. And even Coogler addressed it. He told Business Insider that asking for ownership was less about power and more about personal symbolism. I mean, think about it. This was a film about black ownership, and why not kind of use the symbolism there and try to get in on this deal? He says he has no other feature films that he owns, and he doesn't plan on inking a deal like this in the future. Hallie?
And $63 million on opening weekend. That's pretty good for a movie that's not a superhero film, right?
A lot of people, some people may question that, but that's a pretty good deal, especially for an original film. This isn't some sort of remake. And it was also Easter weekend. So maybe you had some people that didn't show up just because of the theme here. It's horror, but, I think it's doing pretty well. Some estimate that it could gross up to $300 million, Hallie.
Wait, I'm being told, Dana, by my producers, you saw it? Did you watch it this weekend?
I did. It was fantastic. I got to tell you, I'm not like a big horror person, but Hallie, the movie got me excited about going to the theater again. Seriously.
And you buried the lead.
Parts of it. I know part of it was kind of like, there were some jumpy moments, but I will say that there's a lot of symbolism, and it's very eclectic. It went in a direction I did not think it would go, and it was pretty good. Hallie,
we'll leave it there. No spoilers. Dana Griffin, thank you very much for that breakdown. Appreciate it. Good to see you. That does it for us for this hour. Thank you for watching. More coverage picks up right now. Tonight, the future of the Catholic Church is up for grabs, with a conclave to choose the next pope getting into gear after the death of Francis early this morning. We're going through who's on the shortlist for the top job as memorials for Francis pour in from around the world. Then stocks falling again today over concerns President Trump could fire the Fed chair, why more investors seem to be selling America rather than buying it like the White House wants. And we're diving deeper into that breaking news we brought you last hour on this new lawsuit by Harvard against the Trump administration, how the university is making the case that freezing billions of dollars in funding is illegal. Plus, the White House may be on a mission to create a new baby boom, how the Trump administration is set to push new incentives to reportedly spike America's birth rate. And the FAA launching an investigation after this. We're going to show it to you here. A Delta plane engine catching fire just minutes before takeoff in Orlando. Everybody on board had to slide out those emergency chutes. What we know about what caused it coming up later in the show. Hey, I'm Hallie, and tonight we are learning from the Vatican that Pope Francis died from a stroke and heart failure early this morning as the world mourns the progressive leader of a faith followed by more than 1 billion people. I want to show you a live look here at Vatican City. Look at that. You have a lot of people still there, even at midnight in St. Peter's Square, some 13 hours after the Pope's death was announced. This, of course, about 2 miles from the Roman church where he asked to be buried. Now, you've got memorials across the world, from Notre Dame to New York, from Bethlehem to Francis's home of Argentina as well, Buenos Aires. His formal funeral rites already beginning. The Pope's body expected to be displayed in St. Peter's Basilica by Wednesday morning, with his funeral then in the next 4 to 6 days, so at some point before the end of the weekend. Then after that, it is time for the conclave. You probably know what a conclave is if you watched that big movie last year. It's the secret election for picking a new pope. All the world's cardinals under the age of 80 will meet at the Sistine Chapel to deliberate and to vote. You have a lot of those cardinals already on their way to Rome as we speak for the funeral. The actual election itself, the conclave, is not going to start for another couple weeks. Once everybody's there, they'll go through the process. They'll cast secret ballots. And of course, we will know if somebody has won, with everybody watching the color of the smoke. Black, no pope. White, new pope. That's what we saw, of course, back when Francis was elected. You're looking at it here in 2013, a huge moment for Catholics around the world. So who's it going to be? Who's next? Take a look. This is the short list. There will be no pop quizzes, but you do have 17 men set to have their resumes picked apart over the course of the next several weeks. And the big questions now, will the next pope follow Francis's progressive reforms or revert to the more conservative approach of his predecessors? Can they address a Catholic Church that has seen a shift growing in Asia and Africa, slowing in Europe and the Americas, especially here in the United States? And who will show up to pay their respects for Francis, for a man who touched so many lives with his dedication to helping those who needed it most? Hallie will join us with more on those tributes in just a moment. But I want to start at the Vatican, where Molly Hunter is posted up tonight. And Molly, the church facing a lot of questions about its direction. But before we get to that point, right, before the conclave, the Pope will be laid to rest. And he has already planned for so much of this, not just for the funeral, but also in many ways for the conclave itself, because he picked a lot of those cardinals that'll be showing up.
Hallie, not just a lot of them. He picked the majority, and you put those 17 frontrunners up, which I hope our audience was paying attention to. There may be a pop quiz in the next few days. But he, and I'm just going to show some real numbers for you. He appointed 108 cardinals, Hallie, and that's out of 135 under the age of 80. Under the age of 80 means you're eligible to vote in the conclave. 22 were appointed by Benedict XVI. 5 were appointed by John Paul II. But you're stacking the decks, Hallie, in some ways. If you have 108 cardinals who you have chosen, who follow your path, who believe in your vision, but he's also really expanded the global reach of the church, which I think is so interesting. 20, at least, Hallie, cardinals from places that had never previously had cardinals. Now, we've met, and you showed your audience a live look at St. Peter's Square before. We've met a lot of people since we arrived this afternoon, including a couple of Americans, Carol and Martin Apfel, and they actually arrived last week to take part in the Holy Year celebrations. Yesterday, they actually got to see Pope Francis in person. They were out with the masses of crowds on Easter Sunday. And then we spoke with them today about looking forward in the Catholic Church. Take a listen.
Personally, I want a pope like him. I just feel like that, taking care of the poor and is really important to me, and I want somebody like him.
Hallie, what was so interesting is they were so excited to have seen Pope Francis yesterday. They then heard the bells this morning. They came rushing out into St. Peter's Square. And I asked them what it was like to be around pilgrims who were weeping, to be around tourists who were curious, to be around all these people that gathered here. And they said it was more moving than they could possibly have imagined. It was really interesting.
That is interesting, Molly. One of the questions we laid out is who is going to come and pay their respects to Pope Francis. We are learning in just the last few hours that President Trump will be there, along with First Lady Melania Trump. This is his message to American Catholics today.
We love you all. We're with you all. They were with me during the election, as you know, very strongly. And it's just an honor to have the support of the Catholics. And I feel very badly for them because they love the Pope.
You should note, if you were looking at the Easter bunny head, that was during the Easter egg roll this morning, a bit in Congress, but the president's message, of course, on the death of the Pope, resonant for many Catholics here in this country. So walk us through the next few days, because when we saw this, when Pope Francis was elected in that conclave, a number of people obviously came in to pay their respects to the death of the Pope. That's got to be happening again already this time around.
That's right. Pilgrims are already coming. As we talked about, cardinals will be descending, of course, for the conclave, but also tens of thousands of people will come over the next few days. Hallie, I think we will see the majority of heads of state, including the American president and First Lady Melania, come for the funeral, which we are expecting in 4 to 6 days. And Hallie, the kind of most immediate point where we may get some more details about that is tomorrow. The cardinals already in town will have their first meeting, and you can bet that the exact date and more details about that funeral, of which, as you mentioned, Francis had a lot of say in, could come out of that meeting tomorrow. Hallie?
And just to be clear, just so people know, it's not like we know how long the conclave will last, right? I mean, these things, they range. It just depends on what the cardinals decide.
That's exactly right. The last two were about 2 days, and I think, Hallie, one of the things that experts have told us that we're really looking for is if it takes a few more days, if it takes 2, 3, 4, 5 days and kind of extends, the longest conclave recently was 1922, it certainly speaks to a divisiveness that they haven't been able to come to an agreement inside. But we did talk about Pope Francis has put so many cardinals in who really share a vision of the world. It'll be very interesting to see if they can reach agreement quickly.
Molly Hunter in a crowded St. Peter's Square, of course, even after midnight there at the Vatican. Molly, thank you very much. Appreciate you being with us tonight. Hala Garani is in London for us. And Hala, you know, this is a pope that has not shied away from confronting some of the more divisive political issues, not just in America, but around the world. Like in his Easter message, less than, 24 hours ago, he chose to focus on the migrant crisis.
Right. He mentioned Gaza as well. And Francis has always really affirmed during his papacy the right of people to seek shelter and safety in other lands. And this goes against a lot of the rhetoric that we've heard from some world leaders, including President Trump, of course. In 2016, he held a mass at the U.S.-Mexico border. He said migrants are our brothers and sisters, and those who help them are prophets of mercy. Now, you mentioned on Sunday he did convey a similar message in his last Easter Mass, which was delivered through one of the church's cardinals. And this is something that in our reporting, Hallie, in parts of the world that are really torn apart by war, by migrant crises, this is something that has always been very appreciated, including in Muslim-majority countries, whether it's Syria and other parts of the world, where you really have heard over the years a lot of affection expressed toward this pope because he's made such an effort to send a message of inclusivity. There's one migrant in particular who says he was saved by the pontiff. Listen.
He takes so much care for us, and we appreciate all over the world. It's not only about me. He has helped so many people. Yeah, and we thank him for the fight he's fighting for the migrants.
And there you have it, Shia, saying there that he fought for the migrants. And he did not shy away from what has become, not always has been, but has become a very controversial topic.
With so much reaction pouring in from around the world, so many tributes from people everywhere. One that caught our team's attention came from Lionel Messi, of course, the soccer star, who wrote on Instagram, "Thank you for making the world a better place," he said. "We will miss you," which perhaps speaks to how, for Catholics in Central and South America, Francis really represented for some a sea change in the faith.
Absolutely, in particular Argentinians. Of course, he's originally Argentinian, born of Italian parents. The Brazilian president saying he always stood by those who needed him most, the poor, refugees, the young, the elderly, victims of war and all forms of prejudice, just a few others. And there's the Pope in his Pope-mobile, by the way. This was not too long ago, just a little bit more than 24 hours ago. The president of Mexico, a humanist who stood for the poor, peace and equality. You see that theme coming back again and again. The Argentinian president, despite differences that now seem minor, having had the chance to know him and his kindness and wisdom was a true honor for me. He's calling the differences minor, but the Argentinian president and the Pope probably had more than minor differences, certainly when it came to migrants, Hallie. Yeah.
Hala Garani, thank you very much for that. Appreciate it. We'll continue to follow, of course, with continuing coverage, the death of Pope Francis, but we've also got some breaking news just into us here at home. In just the last hour, we have learned that Harvard University is now suing the Trump administration over the freeze of billions of dollars in federal funding to the school. Harvard's president, in a new statement, saying, in his words, that the consequences of the government's overreach will be severe and long-lasting. This is the latest development in an escalating showdown now we've been telling you about for days, after the university resisted a list of demands coming from the Trump administration that included things like Harvard eliminating its DEI program and the mandatory sharing of hiring and admissions data. I want to bring in Antonia Hilton, who is joining us now. So you've had a chance, I think, Antonia, to look through the lawsuit at this point. What's in it? How's the White House responding? And where does this fight go next?
Well, Hallie, this is really a new front in this fight over academic freedom in the U.S. that Harvard has certainly been at the center of, but is not alone in. And they are arguing, essentially, that the Trump administration's list of demands and their move to cancel billions of dollars that would flow to the university, that it's unlawful, unconstitutional, against their First Amendment rights. And much of the lawsuit looks closely at what these impacts could look like, and also at the fact that they're arguing that the administration really doesn't have the authority, the statutes, to do this in the first place. To give you some examples, though, of what's at stake here, some of the Harvard funding or Harvard-related funding, because much of this would touch, for example, cancer institutes, Alzheimer's research centers that aren't actually on the campus at which some of these protests that have become controversial have actually taken place. They're at other organizations and hospitals that just have a relationship partnership with Harvard. People's lives, they're arguing, could be at stake here. There's also an economic impact because of the amount of biotechnological innovation that comes out of Harvard work and Harvard partnerships. I want to read one quote from you, from this for you, which is, the government's attempt to coerce and control Harvard disregards these fundamental First Amendment principles, which safeguard Harvard's academic freedom. And what you really get the sense here is that while this, of course, is a lawsuit about Harvard's treatment from the administration, there's a chance here this could be even bigger as other universities maybe take a page out of Harvard's book and change their tactics going forward and maybe go to court too, Hallie.
That maybe, though, comes with a real asterisk, Antonia, which is, of course, that we don't know if that's going to happen yet. We know that there are those in the Harvard community who want to see that, who have argued that Harvard cannot be the sort of forefront of the resistance by themselves.
That's right. And right now there are conversations ongoing among faculty, administrators, higher ed leaders about possible partnerships. Are they going to pool legal resources, PR resources to do this battle together, major universities? So that's another shift we could see in the coming days. Is there some kind of formalized partnership in which they all kind of unify their strategy and their response? But then there's, of course, the question of, well, what happens to schools like Columbia, right, where they already basically said, we'll do what the Trump administration has asked of us. They're going to be put in a pretty tricky position. Do we go back on the agreements we've started to work on with them? Do we try to join this partnership and maybe these other schools actually don't trust us because we already took steps to do something they are refusing to do and are arguing is unconstitutional? All of that remains up in the air. This is, of course, getting quite messy. And what Harvard is arguing is that the stakes could not be higher here in this fight.
We will watch as this one plays out. Antonia Hilton, thank you for that developing news for us tonight. Appreciate it. President Trump also today turning up the heat on the Fed chair. And guess what? The markets don't love it. Look at that. The Dow, the NASDAQ, the S&P, we're about to show you, all down today. And since early April, when the president rolled out his big tariff plan, down overall about 9%. Thing is, today's slide may have more to do with comments like this one, right? The president on Truth Social slamming his own Fed chair, calling him Mr. Too Late, a major loser, because Jay Powell has not suggested he will lower interest rates soon. And one of the president's advisors just a couple days ago says the president is looking at possibly studying how to fire him. And here's the thing. It's not just that the stock market's down. Bond prices are down. The U.S. dollar index is down as well. Taken together, this may be an indication that despite the president hoping that more people around the world, more investors buy America, they are instead choosing to sell America. I want to bring in NBC's Brian Chung, who's got more for us. The markets really are concerned about this talk about the potential firing of Jay Powell. It's interesting because this is, a leader speaks and the markets respond. And we've seen that today.
Yeah, well, I mean, look, we already had volatility in these markets because of all of the tariff talk, right? We have no certainty now than we did 3 weeks ago over what's going to happen tomorrow. If you're a business, owner, or if you're an investor, you just don't want to make decisions because you don't know what the tariff policy is going to look like. Now, compound on top of that, we don't know if the economic steward of the U.S., which is the head of the Federal Reserve, who is currently Fed Chair Jay Powell, who, by the way, Trump appointed during his first term, you don't know if he's going to have his job through the end of his term in May of 2026. So you have the president that's threatening to perhaps want to even pull him from that position. There are legal questions over whether or not he can do so, but that's just introducing another layer of uncertainty to the markets, and that's a big reason why we've seen selling in the Monday trading, which, by the way, is probably an extension of the fact that markets were also closed on Friday, so they didn't have the chance to react to even some of the commentary at the end of last week from the president over being interested in perhaps firing his own Fed chair at the central bank. But again, all this uncertainty compounding on top of one another.
You've also got the president late this afternoon meeting with major retailers, the heads of Target, I think Lowe's, Home Depot, I think, as well, maybe Walmart as well, maybe not Lowe's. But all of this has to do with tariffs, right, Brian? I mean, I have to think he's getting an earful from some of these companies in a respectful way because of what this means for consumer prices. Yeah, and look, when it comes to how the markets are responding here, we have to remember that the president did ratchet back the tariffs, at least on those quote-unquote reciprocal tariffs on other countries around the world after seeing what was going on in the bond market. So clearly, he is listening to investors, and by extension, he's probably listening to these big business leaders at the likes of these retail companies like Target
Target and Walmart, which have reportedly had meetings at the White House today. So, yes, whether or not those conversations, though, are going to translate into actual action, we'll have to see. But you could imagine a lot of these financial types are probably also telling the president, hey, let's chill out on the rhetoric with the Federal Reserve, which I want to point out is not new. The president was doing the same thing in 2018, 2019 to also then Fed Chair Jay Powell when he described him as a golfer who can't putt. So, again, the Powell is used to this.
Brian Chung, thank you very much. More to watch on that front. Appreciate it. So as President Trump is on offense against his Fed chair, he's also playing defense for his defense secretary with some questions about whether Pete Hegseth's job may be on the line. Now, the White House press secretary is pushing back against a report suggesting the White House is eyeing a possible replacement for the defense secretary, saying on X the president stands strongly behind Hegseth. And sure enough, that is what we heard from President Trump himself today, too. Watch.
He is doing a great job.
Why do you still have confidence?
Because he's doing a great job. Ask the Houthis how he's doing. Ask the Houthis how much there's function there. There's none. Pete's doing a great job. Everybody's happy with him.
The president facing these questions about this man, Pete Hegseth, because of another sensitive Signal chat. NBC News learning the secretary used his personal phone to share information about U.S. military operations in Yemen to a group chat on Signal, including his wife and brother, according to sources. This was first reported by the New York Times. Remember, this is not the first time that there has been a Signal chat gate making headlines, if you will. Just last month, the editor-in-chief of The Atlantic was mistakenly added to a group chat on Signal talking about strikes in Yemen. That obviously created a huge controversy, backlash from both sides of the aisle. I want to bring in Vaughn Hilliard, who's joining us now. So this happened, right? According to NBC News' reporting here, you've got vigorous pushback from Secretary Hegseth himself, and you've got support now from President Trump, even as at least one Republican member of Congress stopped short of calling on the president to fire Hegseth, but says, hey, if I were the president, I would make a different judgment call here.
Right. We have heard from Democratic senators. We've heard from Don Bacon, a congressman, Republican congressman from Nebraska. We have heard from former military officials saying that there were several reasons to be concerned about Pete Hegseth and the second Signal chain that included him, but 13 others in the Pentagon, but also his brother and his wife, who does not have the security clearance. This is for Pete Hegseth, the chief Pentagon official, a moment where there are questions about the extent to which, if there was either a leak from this or whether it could be hacked by a foreign entity, that U.S. military personnel were put at risk, understanding that there were airstrike operations in Yemen that were discussed, but also the extent to which family members were on this, but also you're looking at that not only is Signal not the secure channel for sensitive, potentially classified information, Hallie, but also for the Pentagon chief here, there are serious questions about the individuals who he has surrounded himself over the last week who have since left the Pentagon. Several senior advisors who were close allies of his have since left, and the former chief spokesperson for the Pentagon in an op-ed last night called it a month of hell and suggested that he foresees Pentagon Secretary Pete Hegseth ultimately leaving his post because of the way that he has run the Pentagon so far.
Yeah, that op-ed sounding the alarm here. The question is, if that is going to have any impact on Hegseth's job security. He was very defiant on this today. And we know that President Trump tends to like to see a fighter, Vaughn.
And that's what he is portraying. And where else, other than to take on that fight, than the Easter egg role with his own family standing behind him. Take a listen to part of his defense.
They take anonymous sources from disgruntled former employees, and then they try to slash and burn people and ruin their reputations. Not going to work with me. I have spoken to the president, and we are going to continue fighting on the same page all the way.
And NBC News is reporting that an aide had even warned him about using the Signal chat for this type of communication, and yet apparently he continued to proceed. And this is going to likely come down to a decision from the president, because as you heard there, we saw not only a defiant Pentagon Secretary Hegseth, but during the course of the transition, when he was up for confirmation, there were serious allegations of sexual misconduct and extensive drinking. Ultimately, he was confirmed narrowly, and yet the questions have only risen, this heightening concern about the security and the leadership of the Pentagon Secretary, Hallie.
Vaughn, do we have any sense of how prevalent signal use is inside the administration?
Well, the first signal chat included the National Security Advisor, and the president had suggested it was a mistake by Michael Waltz. And Caroline Leavitt had said that there would be an investigation and that the investigation was closed, effectively pushing it aside. We know Signal is often used by members of the administration, by members of the media. It is a safer, a more secure form of communication, encrypted, but at the same time, there's clearly questions about how prevalent it was and how serious of confidential or classified information was being discussed over the course of these first months of the administration, and to what extent, if any, did foreign adversaries potentially gain access to any of that information. So much of that is still yet known.
Vaughn Hilliard, live for us there outside the White House. Vaughn, thank you very much. Also, in just the last hour, President Trump online saying it's just not realistic to give everybody a trial when it comes to his deportation efforts, saying in part that we can't do that because to do so would take, without exaggeration, 200 years. The reality check, of course, that is likely an exaggeration, as the president seems to be resisting here. He is referencing, really in substantive detail now for the first time, that Supreme Court decision over the weekend, that rare early morning order on Saturday that temporarily pressed pause on the president's push to deport a group of Venezuelan migrants out of the country here. The Supreme Court, of course, halting that at least for now, as lawyers for that group of migrants said that they have not had a chance, as the Supreme Court previously ordered, to have their day in court, to make their case to a judge. It's all happening as there is, of course, the backdrop of this separate case related to the man you see here on the left, Kilmar Abrego Garcia. You have a number of Democratic lawmakers following in the footsteps of Senator Chris Van Hollen and traveling to El Salvador after Abrego Garcia was removed from this country, the administration says by an error, mistakenly deported to a prison in El Salvador. David Noriega is following all of this for us tonight. David, there is this question of sort of where he is. It sounds like, based on information that we're getting, Abrego Garcia is out of this kind of notorious maximum security prison. He has been placed into a different location. What have you been hearing from some of the lawmakers who have traveled on this trip? We know his wife has suggested, that she wants to see him freed ASAP, along with, as she put it, other Kilmars, other people who may be in that situation as well. The White House says he is allegedly a gang member. His lawyers have said that is not the case.
Yeah, Hallie, so yes, to address your first point, we do know that Kilmar Abrego Garcia has been moved out of Secot, or Secot, the notorious maximum security prison that the government built, the Bukele government built as part of its crackdown on the gangs here in El Salvador. And from information that we have from the Trump administration, some of which was filed in this federal court case, he was moved to a lower security prison in a city about an hour out of San Salvador, where I am now, called Santa Ana. Now, what's important, though, Hallie, and this is what some human rights lawyers that I've been talking to here, and what some of those Democratic lawmakers also that I spoke to today are saying, is that we don't actually know that to be true today at this moment, because it remains the case that nobody, not Abrego Garcia's lawyers, not his family, not anybody else, has access to Abrego Garcia and is able to communicate with him. We do not know where he is for sure. We only have the representations that the U.S. government is making, which are in turn secondhand from the Bukele administration. Now, the Democratic lawmakers who came here today had a couple of concrete goals, one of which was to establish contact with Abrego Garcia, either through themselves directly or through his counsel or his family. They did not achieve that goal. Their secondary goal was more of a media or a public goal. They said that they wanted to keep attention on this case, to keep pressure on the Trump and the Bukele administrations. I spoke to one of those lawmakers, Maxwell Frost from Florida, on that larger goal of theirs, and here's what he said. Take a listen.
This could happen to any one of our constituents, any one of my constituents in Orlando, Florida, tomorrow or the next day. And so it's important that we draw the line here with Kilmar, that we ensure that he gets taken home, brought back home, where he can go through a process and go through due process.
On the politics of this, Hallie, Republicans are welcoming this. They think that this is a winning issue for them. They think that Democratic lawmakers look bad coming here to defend people they describe as gang members and criminals. We'll see how that plays out. Hallie?
David Noriega live for us there in El Salvador. We look forward to more of your reporting from there, David, tomorrow, and I appreciate that. Also tonight, the FAA trying to figure out why a Delta plane engine caught fire just minutes after the plane left the gate in Orlando, right before takeoff. Look at this. Gosh, that's not what you want to see, right? If you're sitting there in the plane getting ready to go. The flames, the smoke on the right side engine, it charred the wing. You had some 300 almost passengers and crew members having to evacuate on those emergency slides. Look at them. You can see them there on the tarmac. There's that slide deployed over on the left side of the plane. Inside, some passengers who were on board trying to get to the front of the plane to be able to get out. Fortunately, there have been no reports of anybody getting hurt. I want to bring in Tom Costello now with more on this. Still scary and still rare, Tom, to see something like that.
Very scary and, yes, thankfully very rare. This was an Airbus A330 fully loaded, as you mentioned, 300 passengers and crew members. This was the #2 engine. In other words, if you're sitting on the plane, it's the engine on the right-hand side. And what Delta says is this was a fire in the tailpipe. That is very rare indeed. It quickly was shooting flames out the back of that engine. What happened? Well, the pilots immediately shut fuel down so it was no longer feeding fuel into the fire. That helped immediately shut down the fire, and firefighters then hit it with a water cannon. Very fast response by firefighters. Meanwhile, as you saw, passengers were sliding down the evacuation slides, but they could only slide down the left-hand side of the plane because the right side had the fire, right? You don't want people sliding down onto that side of the plane. But because of that, that slowed everything down a little bit. Thankfully, nobody injured, and Delta says everybody has been reaccommodated or will be reaccommodated as well.
One thing, too, good reminder, don't get your luggage. Don't be trying to grab stuff on your way out, right? I mean, that's always
Can I underscore this 100 times? The flight attendants were yelling to passengers, leave everything behind, get out, there's a fire. People were still grabbing their carry-ons, still grabbing their backpacks.
Leave it.
Sorry.
Leave it, man.
That is the dumbest damn thing you can do. I'm going to be emphatic about this. Please listen to me. This is life or death. If you delay people behind you because you're grabbing your carry-on and somebody dies, that's on you. The stakes are life and death. And it doesn't matter how many times we report this over the years. Leave your carry-ons behind every time people want to grab the carry-on. So that is such an important message, and I'm emphatic about it, but I think that we really got to listen.
You got to be, Tom.
Lastly, guess what? There was another emergency landing after this one back in Orlando. Another flight, headed also to Atlanta, had to turn around because of a cabin pressurization issue with Delta. They came back, landed safely, and Delta says they apologized to the passengers on both flights.
Is this something where we're hearing, it feels like we're hearing more about incidents on planes because we're more attuned to it because of things that have happened over the course of the last few months, these high-profile incidents? Or are some of these things happening more often? Do we know yet? Can we quantify that yet?
I think yes and yes. Okay. In other words, yes, we're paying a lot more attention. Yeah. Second of all, under any circumstance, this kind of a situation we saw today in Orlando would get our attention. Yeah. Absolutely, right? The emergency landing we had in Denver, the emergency landing in Houston, the plane crashes in Toronto and Reagan National, the close call at Midway. This has been a year of close calls, and that's why a lot of people are on edge.
That's right. Tom Costello, we're so glad to have you with us. Thank you for the reality check on all of it. I appreciate it. Lots more to get to after the break, including some breaking news just into us. A new flooding nightmare in New Orleans developing in just the last hour. Want to show you cars submerged. You've got a ton of rain piling up as we speak. We'll show it to you right after the break. Plus, Walgreens now becoming the latest company to owe millions related to the opioid epidemic. Next. Let's get you over to the 5 things our team thinks you should know about tonight. Closing arguments happening in Arizona with the so-called doomsday mom defending herself and resting her case late today. You see her there without calling a single witness and without presenting any evidence. Lori Vallow Daybell, charged with conspiring to murder her husband, pleaded not guilty, telling the jury that he was shot in self-defense. Prosecutors say that's not the case. They say she conspired to murder her husband so she could collect life insurance money. Vallow is already serving a life sentence in Idaho for killing her 2 children. Number 2, Walgreens now paying the federal government at least $300 million in a huge opioid settlement over allegations the company pressured pharmacists to fill millions of invalid opioid prescriptions and then billed those scripts to Medicare. Walgreens admits no liability here and says in a statement their pharmacists are dedicated healthcare professionals, in their words. Number 3, measles infections are now officially in more than half the country. More than 85 cases reported in the last week alone in more than 25 states. 2 unvaccinated children have died in Texas, and 1 person died in New Mexico. Number 4, use of magic mushrooms, of course the drug technically known as psilocybin, is on the rise. It's spiked nearly 200% in people over the age of 30 since 2019. It's becoming legal in some states with hopes the hallucinogenic could treat mental health and substance use disorders. Number 5, if you're a Duke basketball fan, the NBA draft may have just gotten a little more exciting. Cooper Flagg is throwing his hat into the ring at the age of 18. He's only played 1 college basketball season, but already he's expected to be one of the top picks in the upcoming draft. All right, listen, we got to get to some breaking news in just the last little bit here. Some major flash flooding happening now in New Orleans. 6 inches of rain in just the last couple of hours, turning the French Quarter into kind of a river here. Let me bring in Bill Cairns, who's joining us now. We saw all weekend this slow-moving system working its way across the Midwest, the South headed east. I assume that that's what this is part of?
Exactly, Hallie. A slow-moving thunderstorm right over an area that's below sea level, protected by levees on its side. The pumps aren't keeping up, and there's water everywhere, and the roads are closed, cars are stuck. This picture is how it looks over all of a good section of the city right now. There's water everywhere, and they're telling people to stay off the road, stay where you are, wait till the water begins to drain. But first, we need it to kind of stop raining. And this isn't just isolated. This is all over the place, especially near the interstates, and then under those underpasses. You see those vehicles stuck there. That's exactly what we're watching. Flash flood warning. National Weather Service is telling everyone stay where you are. Extremely dangerous situation. It doesn't look that bad. This is the radar over the last 3 hours. When you see bright red, that's a torrential downpours, like summertime thunderstorm anywhere in the USA. And now, if you watch this area, especially just to the southeast of downtown New Orleans, that's where it just hasn't moved over the last 3 hours. We have flash flood warnings everywhere you see here. That's outlined, which is all of New Orleans, including the French Quarter area, all the way up to the lake shore and even south here of the Mississippi. And then as far as rainfall totals go, Hallie, our computers are telling us in the last 3 hours, 5 to 6 inches. So it's no wonder that they're having trouble keeping up with the pumps. This is out by the airport, a rough total about 4.7 inches. This is kind of what you'd expect like in a tropical storm. So it's very difficult, and until it stops raining, it's not going to clear up. A very difficult rush hour.
We're watching that, of course, as we're seeing some of those images coming in. Bill Cairns, thanks for staying on top of it. Appreciate it. Also new tonight, the White House is apparently looking at ways to reverse the declining birth rate in the United States, with one senior White House official telling NBC News the administration is encouraging people to have babies, saying that's what we talked about during the campaign. The New York Times has some details about possible specifics, like the administration considering giving out a $5,000 baby bonus to every American mother after delivery, paying for programs to help educate women about their menstrual cycles, and reserving 30% of Fulbright scholarships for applicants who are married or who have kids. The U.S. birth rate hit a record low in 2023. And as we've talked about on this show, there can be economic consequences to that, like an aging population and a shrinking labor force. NBC's Yamiche Alcindor joins us now. What's interesting, Yamiche, we just told folks last week about the so-called pro-natalist movement, as it is called, and it clearly has some close allies in the White House here.
That's right. They definitely have close allies in the White House, including the president himself, who has encouraged Americans to have more children. Now, we just got a statement in from the White House press secretary, Caroline Leavitt. I want to read part of it to you. She said, President Trump is proudly implementing policies to uplift American families, from securing order at the border to keeping violent criminals out of our communities to lowering taxes and the cost of living. The president wants America to be a country where all children can safely grow up and achieve the American dream. Now, we've also been hearing from close allies of the president, including Vice President J.D. Vance and, of course, Elon Musk, the world's richest man and a top Trump aide. Elon Musk has at least 14 children. J.D. Vance, the vice president, has about 3. Take a listen to what they've said.
Most countries, they should view the birth rate as the single biggest problem that needs to solve.
I want more babies in the United States of America.
And as you noted, in 2023, we had one of the record low birth rates here, about 3.6 million births. That was the lowest since 1979. And since about 2015, the birth rate has declined in the U.S. by about 2%, except for in 2019, 2020, when maybe people had a little bit more time on their hands. That being said, the president has also been pushing for IVF. At one point during the campaign, he told NBC News that he was going to make IVF, in vitro fertilization, a fertility treatment, free for all Americans. He now has a number of his aides studying that issue. So the president has been very vocal and supportive of having more children, and we'll have to see sort of what this administration actually does to facilitate that, Hallie.
Yamiche Alcindor live for us there outside the West Wing. Yamiche, thank you very much. Good to see you. A new report on cancer shows a decline in the number of people dying across the country, but there is a catch. It's showing more women being diagnosed with cancer overall. It looked at data from the last couple of decades, right, since 2001 up to 2022, and says things like screening, better treatment, and fewer people using tobacco helped lower the death rates for lung cancer and other smoking-related cancers. But researchers say there's more people being diagnosed with other kinds of cancer, particularly more women, more young adults. Dr. Kavita Patel is joining us now. What does this study show us, and why is it such a big deal?
Yeah, Hallie, so what's interesting is that, as you said, that we've seen significant declines, even through COVID. Honestly, a lot of us were wondering if these declines would be persistent through COVID. And yes, there were some problems with access to health care and to screenings, but overall, a significant decline. Not surprised about the smoking, but then unfortunately, just as surprised about the incidence of cancer. I want to highlight something that you just touched on. If you're a woman ages 50 to 64, you are now more likely to have an incidence that surpasses men for incidence of cancer. And if you're under the age of 50, it's pretty young, that you are also more significantly likely to actually be diagnosed with cancer. That means that women are not getting detected and they're getting cancers earlier.
So for people to decrease the risk of any cancer, but specifically the cancers mentioned in the study, it's all about screening. It's all about sort of proactive awareness, right?
Yeah. So the 5 things, I think, Hallie, it's a perfect time to just remind people of like 5 things we can do, like reducing alcohol intake, reducing tobacco intake, thinking about a healthy weight, nutrition overall, and then talking about the screenings. Just a reminder that we actually have now a robust kind of set of screenings that you can do, everything from lung, breast, cervical cancer. And I want to put a plug in for a vaccine that can prevent cervical cancer as well. So all of this should be in your kind of armament, man or woman. Talk to your doctor about it, because depending on your genetic risk factors, we might screen you earlier. Just bring the conversation up. It's never too young to have that conversation.
That's for sure. Dr. Kavita Patel, good to see you as always. Thank you. Coming up, why some new arguments in court could totally change how we all use Google. Plus, take a look. This semi-truck essentially exploding on a highway in Indiana. Oof, why a huge stretch of the highway is still shut down. Why California crooks are chopping down a ton of trees in L.A. But first, Google today in court fighting to keep a judge from breaking up the company. Lawyers for Google argue that that would be, in their words, extreme, and it would hurt people by breaking Google products that millions use. The Department of Justice, on the other hand, said that if the court doesn't do something now, Google could use its big investments into AI to become even more dominant in the world of searching for stuff online. It's all part of this massive antitrust case where a judge has already ruled last summer that Google, yes, basically has a monopoly on web search. Question is now what to do about it. If the DOJ has its way, Google could be forced to sell off Chrome. You know Chrome, it's that web browser that like 2/3 of the planet uses. Google obviously hopes to avoid that. I want to bring in NBC News legal analyst Danny Savalos, who's been following this one for us. Google is fighting this battle on 2 fronts. It just lost another monopoly case about its ad service. We could be looking at a very different company if and when this all gets settled in court, right?
Yes. In fact, they even lost another case about its app store. I think that was 2023. So Google's been hit quite a bit by the courts in the last few years. But let's first take a look at what the DOJ wants the court to do to Google. We have that here on a full screen. And the DOJ wants Google to have its Chrome browser sold off to another company, and those payments to tech companies to make Google the default search engine, and, of course, license search results to competitors. Now, when it comes to antitrust, Hallie, there are usually 2 categories of remedies. Some are basically conduct-based. In other words, the court says, thou shalt do a bunch of things. Google would prefer that outcome to the other option, which is a structural remedy. In other words, breaking up the company, like we talked about, breaking off these pieces, whether it be the phone part of the company, the search engine part of the company, whatever the case may be. That's something Google would really not like to see happen.
So what is the best case for Google? If that's the worst case scenario, what's the best case for Google?
Yeah, Google's going to want conduct-based remedies. In other words, the best they can hope for, because think about it. We're really, if this were a criminal case, we're at the sentencing phase. The guilt has already been found by the judge. This trial now is really about what is the court going to do to remedy the situation. And antitrust is so unique because no two antitrust cases are alike. And it's also a bit of a paradox because, as we've talked about on the show, and this is one of Google's arguments, that the government says we have a monopoly. We say we're just really successful. We're really good at this. We beat Microsoft on the merits, not because of anything wrong that we did. So, I mean, they both might be a little right. Google may have a monopoly, may have too much power in the industry. And on the other end, Google got there by good old-fashioned hard work, maybe.
Danny Savalos, one to watch. What's the timeline on that, by the way? When do we expect a resolution? Days, weeks, months, years?
No, I mean, the resolution, I think, probably months. I would say months in this case.
Danny, thanks. NBC News covers hundreds of other stories every day. And because it can be tough to read or watch or listen to them all, our bureau teams have done it for you. This is what they tell us is going down in their regions in a segment we call The Local. Out of our Midwestern Bureau, look at this. This tractor trailer in flames after it exploded, essentially, on an Indiana highway. Some lanes reopened, but even now, part of the road is still shut down. The fire was put out, and fortunately, there aren't any reports of anybody hurt. Out of our Western Bureau, police are looking into why multiple trees have been mysteriously chopped down in downtown LA. You see it there? At first, people were like, oh, maybe that's just the city doing some work. The trees were just left there, though, on streets, blocking sidewalks. No suspects have been identified, and nobody really knows why it's happening. Out of our Northeast Bureau today, tens of thousands of people running the Boston Marathon, some of them breaking records and making history. A runner from Kenya winning the women's division and smashing the record for fastest time there. On the men's side, another Kenyan taking home first place. And listen to this, that runner's brother also won the marathon back in 2012. So that makes him the first brothers in marathon history in Boston to hold that championship title. You could say it runs in the family. Coming up, why some of the neediest teams in the NFL may not get the young star quarterbacks they're looking for. NFL teams hoping for a quick and cheap fix to their football frustrations, maybe out of luck Thursday night. Why? Because the most important and most expensive position is in short supply this year. We're talking quarterbacks. Take a look at these big three mock drafts. All of them have Cam Ward from Miami going #1 overall to the Titans in Tennessee. But after that, ESPN's got a couple quarterbacks. The Athletics got one. Our partners over at NBC Sports don't have any other QB in the first round. And that is a big deal because as quarterback salaries are soaring to become bigger chunks of the salary cap, one of the most effective ways for teams to get back into the playoffs is to take a young QB who's still only on a rookie deal, a la the Washington Commanders. They built up a good team, drafted Jaden Daniels on his cheap contract, right to the playoffs. Obviously, ultimately defeated by the Philadelphia Eagles on their march to winning the Super Bowl. Sam Brock is joining us now. What? It's just a fact.
It's gratuitous. It's gratuitous. It's unnecessary.
Here's what's interesting about this whole thing is that quarterbacks in so many ways deliver, and there's other positions too, but especially quarterbacks, they're razzle-dazzle in the league, right? They're in so many ways the faces of these franchises. They're critical for viewers as the NFL is looking to reach out to, for example, more women. You know, younger folks are already a big part of the NFL demo, but there's a big demo that the NFL wants to reach. Quarterbacks are a part of that for each of these teams. You don't have to find a QB in the first round, but sometimes it helps, right?
Absolutely. Your synopsis was spot on. This is the foundation, not just for an NFL team, but it's also a really important position. Yes.
Was that your polite way of saying you took everything I was going to say? I'm sorry. I just, I like to talk about it.
No, that's not what I was saying. That's not what I was saying. I will, however, answer your question, which is that you have this wild pendulum swing where last year, Hallie, 6 of the top 12 picks in the draft we're all quarterbacks. And it's not like this year there's not a lot of need. There are 5 or 6 teams that desperately need quarterbacks in the NFL. But these particular prospects, their traits are not strong enough. And by traits, I mean, how big are they? What's their arm talent like? What kind of mobility do they possess? This is where the top 5 or 6 prospects in this year's draft stack up as overall prospects, according to The Athletic. This is a very viable source. Cam Ward is the only one that's considered to be likely a starting quarterback in the NFL. He's rated, as you can see on that graphic there, as the number 13 overall prospect, but he's going to be the number 1 pick. Shedeur Sanders, who was the most intriguing and polarizing prospect in the entire draft. Where is he going to go? 3 to the Giants, 21 to the Pittsburgh Steelers, or not even in the first round? He's ranked as the 34th overall talent. Then you get Jackson Dart and Tyler Shuck, Jalen Milroe. Let's fast forward now, or I should say, rewind to last year and look at the top quarterback prospects in that draft, and you'll see something very different. Caleb Williams was ranked as the number 1 player in the draft. Drake May, top 5. Jaden Daniels, the aforementioned, who ended up being so far the best quarterback in this draft, was the number 8 overall prospect. J.J. McCarthy, Bo Nix, the same deal. So what you're seeing is a massive swing in the valuation of these players and their ceilings. And we mentioned the quarterbacks, Hallie, that the teams that need quarterbacks, that includes the New York Giants. It includes, the Pittsburgh Steelers. It includes the Raiders. Yeah. You have, obviously, the Saints. They pick at 9. And then the Tennessee Titans, they're the first pick in the draft. They're going to take a quarterback. But then it's like, who's after Cam Ward?
Sam, I feel like I don't need to watch SportsCenter now that I've watched you, because I'm so well informed about this. Pull up out of the sports weeds for a second, though. Explain why this matters to the casual NFL watcher, maybe somebody who only dips in for the playoffs. Because I keep coming back to this idea that this stuff matters. The QB is not just the linchpin of the team for its gameplay. It's like the linchpin of the brand for the team, too.
It matters for a couple of reasons. One, because a quarterback can swing the entire franchise's prospects. You can have basically a mediocre team, but if you get an Andrew Luck, to go make a Colts reference to a few years ago, he can carry an entire franchise on his own, and you can build pieces around him. But you need that one guy, and it's really hard to find. And then also just the idea that, these guys are coming in and they have varied stories where they've gone to different schools and had backgrounds where they've had to hone their craft over the course of years. The time, the effort, the sacrifice. I know Jalen Hurts, for you, was not considered for the Eagles to be a high-end prospect, and he worked his way to the top of the NFL pyramid. That's what we all want to see, right? That's exciting stuff.
It sure is. Anything's exciting when you're talking about the Super Bowl champion Philadelphia Eagles.
No doubt about it.
Thank you so much for being with us. I appreciate you. Thanks for that breakdown. We'll be looking for more, of course, when the draft starts later this week.
You got it.
Coming up here on the show, the new horror movie hit that may actually be spooking some Hollywood executives. Next. All right, so have you seen Sinners? It's that big new horror movie that raked in $63 million over this past weekend. But more importantly, it has a lot of people in Hollywood and beyond wondering whether the ownership deal that the studio reportedly struck with its director, Black Panther director Ryan Coogler, is going to have a big impact on future deals. This is the 4th collaboration between Coogler and star Michael B. Jordan. This time they're fighting vampires. But even more frightening, perhaps, to studios, the unusually generous deal that Coogler apparently cut with Warner Brothers. I want to bring in NBC's Dana Griffin, who's been following all of this for us. And this is part of what is elevating this to this interesting sort of news story, Dana, is that this particular deal that Ryan Coogler got could change the business of the movie business in some ways. Explain that.
Yeah, I think that's what some people are fearful of, but this was a very rare, unique deal, especially because, think about it, Ryan Coogler is a very rare talent. So according to Puck News and the New York Times, they say that Ryan Coogler not only got the first dollar gross, which essentially means Warner Brothers agreed to give him a cut of the gross ticket sales rather than waiting for the film to become profitable, which is more common. Coogler will also own the rights to Sinners in 2050. That's a rare concession for studios to make. You have some rival film execs saying that they were horrified that Warner Brothers would give a film away even after 25 years. And you had one anonymous studio exec say that the Sinners deal sets a very dangerous precedent, another calling this an extinction-level threat. Now, you have other experts who say, it's not that serious. This was a one-time deal. And even Coogler addressed it. He told Business Insider that asking for ownership was less about power and more about personal symbolism. I mean, think about it. This was a film about black ownership And why not kind of use the symbolism there and try to get in on this deal? He says he has no other feature films that he owns, and he doesn't plan on inking a deal like this in the future. Hallie?
And $63 million on opening weekend. That's pretty good for a movie that's not a superhero film, right?
You know, a lot of people, some people may question that, but that's a pretty good deal, especially for an original film. This isn't some sort of remake. So, and it was also Easter weekend. So maybe you had some people that didn't show up just because of the theme here. It's horror, but, I think it's doing pretty well. Some estimate that it could gross up to $300 million, Hallie.
Wait, I'm being told, Dana, by my producers, you saw it? Did you watch it this weekend?
I did. It was fantastic. I got to tell you, I'm not like a big horror person, but Hallie, the movie got me excited about going to the theater again. Seriously.
And you buried the lead.
Parts of it. I know part of it was kind of like, there were some jumpy moments, but I will say that there's a lot of symbolism, and it's very eclectic. It went in a direction I did not think it would go, and it was pretty good. Hallie,
we'll leave it there. No spoilers. Dana Griffin, thank you very much for that breakdown. Appreciate it. Good to see you. That does it for us for this hour. Thank you for watching. More coverage picks up right now.
Thanks for watching. Stay updated about breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app or follow us on social media.